Okay, here we go again. Just like last hour, we'll try to keep this short. And again, hopefully it's the idea that when you return next week, we can hit the ground running and do that at your pace. Okay, not that there's a lot of information that you would know about this, but probably one of the neatest things that takes place with the endocrine system is how it sometimes works on a time clock. What that means is, how does the body know when to grow? Well, it really doesn't, but through going through that process of puberty, how do bones know when to grow longer? Well, it's actually this that takes place or would occur with different types of hormones that are being secreted. It's not the first time that we talked about hormones. Gastrin, cholestockinin are two different types of hormones. Adrenaline or epinephrine from last chapter we had briefly discussed that would, again, the first two examples turns the acid pumps on or shuts them off. And then in this case, the epinephrine or adrenaline would raise your heart rate. Then norepinephrine, I believe, would counteract that. So some of these are negative feedback loops, but some of them are what we call positive feedback loops. And the one that we had seen in a video, was that on Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember which, where it was called The Tool Man Delivers. And when it's a sow, a cow, a human, a dog, cat, any one of those types of animals that has a period of gestation, once that oxytocin, which is a hormone, causes that uterus to start to contract, and in that brief video, it said that the contractions were somewhere around 3 minutes apart, which means it's not going to be much longer until the infant is going to be born. Okay, so with that of introduction here, okay, glands, of course, secrete substances. Notice the gallbladder really is not a gland. Okay, it's an organ, but it's not a gland. And we'll explain what that means here in just a moment. And one thing to keep in mind, okay, these hormones that travel in the bloodstream, okay, hormones are lipids. And we know lipids are classified also as oils, and of course, it doesn't take a genius to make that correlation that oils do not dissolve in water. So it is very important that as we look at these hormones then that are composed of lipids, okay, they will not dissolve in the bloodstream. Okay, well, why is that important? How else can these hormones get from point A to point B? Either a signal would have to be sent, okay, but in this case, when we look at the pituitary gland, part of that, I think we had shown you a picture of that, and part of that is with these sets of hormones that are here, and we'll get you a better in-depth picture of what's actually happening at a later time, okay, are actually going to travel through the bloodstream to go from point A to point B. So one of the things you might have noticed that before you left on Tuesday, it said hormone versus synapse, okay. A synapse, just picture that kind of like a snapping function, just like this. Very quick, does not last very long. That's the synapse, okay? But with that of hormones, they travel through the bloodstream, so they have much further to travel, but their effects are much, much longer, okay? Because when our body goes through different types of growth phases, usually through whether it's parathyroid hormone or thyroxine or a thyroid hormone, that's when you're going through puberty, and that's what's causing your bones to elongate. And that's where maybe you might remember seeing some of your relatives that at that time when you're 11, 12, or 13, you run into them, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much they've grown. Okay? Well, there's a specific reason for that. Some of these hormones are having an effect on different types of target cells, whether it's those in your skeletal system. That's probably the easiest example. Your growth plates on your femur, your radius, ulna, humerus, all of those examples of long bones that will begin to elongate because it's having an effect from some of these hormones to tell them, okay, let's get going, let's start to grow. Okay, so it's important that these hormones are not being able to dissolve in the bloodstream, which they don't, and since they are composed of lipids, they can pass the cell barrier or that phospholipid bilayer fairly easily. All right. Is that what I wanted to discuss with that? Okay. Oh, the gallbladder. I was going to say that does not secrete substances, okay? Because it stores bile there, if you remember, okay? And the specific anatomy of your liver, remember there is a left and a right hepatic duct. Okay, so once those two merged together, you had a cystic duct. Okay, then that cystic duct would come down and actually form the common bile duct. Okay, even though that is going down, eventually what happens, remember there are sphincter muscles. I don't know if you can see that because we're looking into the dark here. Those sphincter muscles will contract like this and shut. So then, just like what would happen in a garden hose, for instance, but there isn't a lot of pressure. Once you kink that off, well, then it's going to have a backflow, and that's what would happen back into your gallbladder. Okay? So again, that is not a gland because it doesn't secrete something, because that bile is just stored there. There's a big difference between a gland that does secretion and a gland that does just storing, and the gallbladder would be an example of that. All right, so let's take a look how far we're getting here. Okay, yeah, I think we will stop at the end of this slide, okay? So just like what we had mentioned earlier, okay, neurotransmitters act over short range, and they're very quick. That's what we said, like snapping of your fingers, the synapse, okay? And again, these hormones are actually regulated by the levels inside the blood. So once the amount of thyroxine maybe reaches an upper level or limit, it will actually shut itself off. You might say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, let's look at that here in just a moment. And oh my, what nice weather we can look at outside. I think the flags are draped straight down. Well, it might be wavering just a little bit, but hopefully you all had well, there's really no use of talking about how nice the weather is here, because you probably won't be seeing this until next week when you get back. Okay, and then some of these hormones, yes, they're very specific, like thyroxine would be, because that's going to cause just your bones to grow. Okay, another one would be that of you could say even estrogen. Do men produce estrogen? Yeah, not very much. Do women produce testosterone? Yeah, but not very much. Okay. So the main hormones, as you would have guessed, is yes, the women have the estrogen and progesterone, where the the men or the males have the testosterone. What that does is actually, of course, helps build muscle. And I think it used to be when women would be working in the gym and they say, well, we want to stay in shape, but we don't want to have such big, bulky muscles. Well, that's just a misconception. That's really not going to happen, to where your muscles are going to bulge out so much that, geez, kind of look like a male here. No, because again, you just don't have the chemical hardware to do that. Now, are your muscles going to get bigger? Yes, that's true, but it's not like you're going to bulge out and look like the Hulk over in that corner. Okay, so what we're talking about here, I should really just put this in the drop folder and you could have it at your own leisure. But what this means is these hormones on the bottom, this is showing a loop here, okay? So once these assorted hormones here reach a certain level, it's kind of like a thermostat, okay? In the winter time, when you raise the temperature on that, okay, the temperature drops below 70 degrees, okay? The furnace kicks in, or whatever heat source will raise that up to a certain level and shut itself off. So what these are doing is, picture these kind of like heaters here. Once it reaches or drops below a certain temperature or a certain level, it's going to raise itself up until your nervous system says, okay, that's enough, and then it regulates here. This is kind of like the thermostat up here, a pituitary gland, or that of the master gland. All right, I see we're approaching 12 minutes, and again, I just want to keep these somewhat short, so again, once we get back here, we can hit the ground running. So that's all I've got for today. Probably the big thing to keep in mind is that when we're talking about hormones, they're all insoluble and they work a wide range of activities or functions, but travel throughout the entire body. And because that's possible is because they're insoluble in water. All right, we'll catch up to you next time.